October 23rd here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with President Yoon Suk-yeol's state visit to Riyadh. The South Korean leader and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman agreed to upgrade their strategic partnership from oil-based to future-oriented relations. 51 deals and memorandums of understanding worth nearly $16 billion have been newly sealed. 17 aid trucks entered Gaza from Egypt on Sunday after 20 trucks went in the previous day. While the UN's humanitarian chief warns civilians that much more is needed, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned the war against Hamas is a do or die. South Korea is doing all it can to tame the spread of lumpy skin disease in cattle. It's spending over $7 million in carrying out inspections with the related ministries across the country. President Yoon Suk-yeol held summit talks with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman during his official state visit to Saudi Arabia. The leaders agreed to level up their cooperation from oil-based to future-oriented ties to transform their respective economies. Our Oh Soo-young starts us off.
South Korea and Saudi Arabia agreed to ramp up their bilateral cooperation to a future-oriented strategic partnership in new industries, with over $15 billion worth of deals to be inked as they prepare for a post-oil economy. President Yoon Suk-yeol and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman held a summit in Riyadh Sunday, as Yoon becomes the first South Korean leader to make a state visit to Saudi Arabia. Their talks also fall upon the 50th anniversary of South Korean firms entering the kingdom's construction sector.
Until now, the bilateral relationship focused largely on one commodity, oil, and construction projects in Saudi Arabia dating back to the 1970s. But now, with the Saudi Vision 2030 looking to diversify away from oil and spark economic and social innovation, the two countries are expanding their cooperation into new promising areas.
As investments in nuclear power plants, green energy, digital technologies, and AI expand globally, our partnership with the Middle East region is moving to a stage that encompasses future industries such as hydrogen, IT, automobiles, and renewable energy.
Yoon said the two countries make optimal partners in growing their post-oil economies, reiterating the need for greater collaboration. He also asked bin Salman to play a leading role in stabilizing global oil prices amid market volatility. The Crown Prince welcomed the President's state visit and pledged to communicate more frequently with Yoon, saying Korea is a key partner in this Vision 2030. Agreeing to strengthen cooperation in the defense sector, the two leaders also saw eye-to-eye on the potential for partnership in fields such as tourism, smart farms, statistics, cybersecurity, and food and drug regulations. They also called for joint efforts to produce solid outcomes before holding a signing ceremony for key memorandums of understanding. These include a visa exemption scheme for diplomats and state officials, establishing a strategic partnership committee, and agreements to cooperate on hydrogen production and utilisation, government statistics, and regulatory procedures on food and medical products. The two leaders also welcomed the more than 50 business MOUs to be signed during Yoon's official visit, worth some $15.6 billion of investment, on top of the $29 billion Riyadh pledged to inject into South Korea last year. Also during their talks, Yoon and bin Salman discussed their response to the Israel-Hamas conflict, with the South Korean leader offering necessary support, including humanitarian assistance. Going forward, Yoon's office says, with South Korea's developmental experience and technological prowess, and Saudi's abundant resources and growth potential, the two countries can strike up synergy as they shift towards a sustainable future and look to overcome complex geopolitical challenges. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Riyadh.
President Yoon also attended an investment forum with business leaders from both countries. There, dozens of agreements were made, and projects were not just limited to infrastructure and oil. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
As South Korea and Saudi Arabia deepen economic cooperation with multi-billion-dollar projects between the two countries, an investment forum was held in light of President Yoon Suk-yeol's visit to Riyadh. President Yoon stepping up in front of around 300 business leaders and government officials from both sides, emphasized the synergy effect between the two countries.
첨단 기술력과 성공적인 산업발전 경험을 보유한 한국과 풍부한 자본과 성장 잠재력을 갖춘 사우디가 손을 잡으면 그 어느 나라보다도 강력한 시너지를 만들어낼 수 있습니다.
According to the top office, 46 MOUs and deals have been signed from this event, and around 30 were deals in high-tech industries and new businesses. This includes Hyundai Motors building an EV plant in Saudi Arabia, as well as deals related to hydrogen energy production as Saudi Arabia prepares itself for the post-oil economy.
이제 양국 간 협력 관계도 원유 건설 협력을 넘어 제조업, 스마트 인프라, 청정 에너지 등 비전 2030 관련된 전 분야로 파트너십을 확장해야 합니다.
South Korea's food and snack producer Nongshim signed deals with Saudi greenhouses to develop smart farms in the country. Punglim Pharmatech, a South Korean medical device manufacturer, agreed to create a Saudi plant. And there were deals in other new types of businesses such as robotics and aesthetics. For conventional areas such as infrastructure and energy, Korea National Oil Corporation and Saudi Arabia's state-run energy company Aramco signed a contract to cooperate in petroleum storage, as well as MOUs for cooperation in Saudi's new smart city construction projects.
양국 경제인 여러분, 이제 사우디는 아시아와 유럽, 아프리카를 연결하는 명실상부한 글로벌 허브 국가로 도약하고 있습니다. 대한민국과 사우디가 함께 써내려갈 새로운 역사의 주인공은 바로 이 자리에 계신 경제인 여러분들입니다.
In terms of Saudi's creation of new cities, President Yoon and the First Lady Kim Gun-hee visited the historical Saudi Arabian town of Daria near Riyadh soon after landing on Saturday. There, President Yoon was asked by Saudi officials to help South Korea participate in a $20 billion project to develop this region. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, over in the Middle East, 17 trucks carrying humanitarian aid entered Gaza from the Rafah crossing. Marking the second straight day, medical aid, food and water were sent into the region. Lee Seung-ja has more.
A day after 20 trucks carried medical aid, food, and water into Gaza on Saturday, another 17 trucks moved through the Rafah crossing with more humanitarian aid. For the second straight day, aid was allowed into the Palestinian enclave during a short window as Israel continued preparations for a ground offensive. Despite the much-needed aid flowing into Gaza over the weekend, the United Nations says about 100 trucks per day are required to meet the needs of Gazans. Also, while the trucks carried food, water, and medical supplies, the shipments did not include much-needed fuel. Meanwhile, with tensions rising on the Israel-Lebanon border, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned Hezbollah that it will be making the biggest mistake of its life if it takes part in the armed conflict. His comments came as he visited troops near Israel's northern border with Lebanon, where increased artillery exchanges have been seen, sparking fears of a new front opening. Operations in the region also resulted in shell fragments from an Israeli tank hitting the Egyptian border on Sunday, leaving at least 7 people injured, including several Egyptian border guards. The Israeli military said the incident is being investigated and expressed sorrow, adding that it was accidental. Also on Sunday, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said the ongoing conflict with Hamas could take months, but stressed that it would be the last against the militant group. Israel says that its air raids have been targeting Hamas commanders and infrastructure, but Gaza's health ministry said Sunday that more than 4,600 Palestinians have been killed, including 1,873 children. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea, the U.S. and Japan staged their first joint aerial exercise near the Korean Peninsula on Sunday. We delve deeper into their trilateral efforts to sharpen security cooperation against North Korean threats with Bruce Bennett this morning. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Let's first talk about the strategic assets from all the three sides. Which ones particularly stood out to you?
Well, I think you start with the US B-52 bomber, a clear indication of an aircraft that could do both conventional and nuclear missions. But then you add F-35 aircraft and other advanced aircraft from the three sides that allow them to be able to carry out very precise attacks and very strong air defense. It was a really good exercise to demonstrate those kinds of capabilities.
Right, definitely. This exercise on Sunday was to counter threats from North Korea. Then what does the air drill really say about their ability to deter North Korean threats while maintaining peace and stability here on the Korean Peninsula?
Well, Kim is always going to be tempted to try to do things, provocations, where he thinks he can succeed. What we have to be prepared to do is to convince him that he's not going to succeed. If he tries to use drones, if he tries to use aircraft, these kinds of drills are demonstrating a strong capability to defeat any provocations. You know, it's a little bit like a team preparing a coach preparing an all-star team for a contest in soccer. And the opponent, North Korea, doesn't want us to be training together because if we do, we will do well. But like a soccer team, all-stars come together, they've got to get used to working with each other. And so this kind of drill is to help them understand they train differently as national forces. They've got to learn to work together. And this is really critical to being effective against any adversary.
Right, it's always good to be prepared. And like you said, it is the three sides' first time conducting such air drills, so it is good to be practicing. Now, what does that say about their trilateral partnership? Because the drill really came as a follow-up measure of the Camp David summit.
Oh, exactly. I think what we're seeing is the three countries are recognizing that North Korea poses a threat to all three of us. Their nuclear weapons could be used against any of the countries. Their missiles with conventional or nuclear warheads could be used. Their submarine forces, their other assets could be used, artillery against South Korea. And we have to be prepared in multiple dimensions to deal with those threats. The better prepared we are, the more likely it is that North Korea will not pose those threats because Kim Jong-un doesn't want to look like he fails in any kind of military activity. He's got a country which fails enough already internally with food and other things. He can't fail in this area too.
Right, and I can say this with confidence that North Korea will not be too happy about the joint drills. And I'm afraid that North might take this as an excuse or an opportunity to stage more military provocations.
Well, let's fundamentally look at what North Korea is doing. They're building nuclear weapons all the time. They're constantly producing more weapons. They're constantly producing more ballistic missiles. Those are provocations. Those violate UN Security Council sanctions and resolutions. So I think what we have to be prepared to say so that our people understand what's going on is these are responses to the provocations North Korea is carrying out that they don't want to have publicly recognized at this point, but that we need to be prepared against to try to discourage Kim. An ancient Roman philosopher said, if you want peace, prepare for war. Because if you're prepared, nobody's going to want to fight a war against you.
I see. But we should expect more of these trilateral exercises to come in the future, right?
Oh, exactly. I think this is the character, the Trilateral summit that our countries held. That was what they concluded is in order for us to work well together, we've got to learn to work together. We've got to learn how each side uses different kinds of capabilities. And that will make us more effective. It will allow us to extend our capabilities and to frustrate North Korea in its provocations. And that's good for all of our people. That's good for peace in the region. I mean, ironically, China ought to be cheering us on because that means there will be peace where there might not otherwise be. And I don't even think that China wants to see a war on the peninsula. Xi Jinping has certainly said he doesn't.
Right. We do have to be mindful that all these drills are to maintain peace and stability in the region of just not here on the Korean Peninsula, but also globally. Thanks as always for your insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
South Korea's government announced plans on Sunday to halt the spread of lumpy skin disease in cattle, including providing special subsidies of over 10 billion Korean won, or almost $7.5 million US. Following the first reported case of the viral disease at a farm in Chungcheongnam-do province last week, the number of cases has risen to 10 across the country. Now, subsidies will be allocated to support the local government's disease prevention activities, including the operation of base disinfection facilities. Starting Monday, the Ministry of the Interior and Safety will conduct joint inspections with the Ministry of Agriculture in 5 West Coast regions, including Incheon and Gyeonggi-do province. South Korea's ruling People Power Party and the government are pushing for new measures to help people's livelihoods, focusing on stabilizing prices of everyday items and energy products. This was shared at a meeting between the leaders of the PPP and higher-ranking government officials at the National Assembly on Sunday. Government supplies of 2,900 tons of cabbage will be released ahead of the upcoming kimchi making season, and there'll be a nationwide discount on certain food products. In addition to extending fuel tax cuts through the year-end, they will actively monitor government reserves of petroleum to take responsive measures when necessary. New data on South Korea's female employment rate has revealed that despite improvement, the country's gender gap is still the 8th largest among the 38 OECD member countries. According to an OECD report on Monday, South Korea's employment rate in the second quarter of 2023 was 76.92% for men and 61.36% for women, a gap of 15.56 percentage points. It's also larger than the OECD average of 13.85 percentage points. South Korea's female employment rate has increased significantly over the past 10 years, but is still low compared to other countries. In fact, Turkey had the lowest female employment at 35.34%. This past Saturday, October 21st, was Hanbok Day. It's a day designated by South Korea's Culture Ministry to raise awareness of the Korean traditional outfit, Hanbok. Our culture correspondent, Song Yu-jin, listened to the stories of people who are working to continue Hanbok's legacy.
Hanbok. It means Korean clothing. The earliest records of Hanbok date all the way back to the ancient Three Kingdoms period. While the tradition of wearing hanbok every day has dwindled, there are those who are working to make sure this 2,000-year-old heritage isn't forgotten. Like hanbok and pattern designer Jang Ha-eun, the CEO of emerging hanbok brand Ur. Her brand designed Blackpink's hanbok costumes for their Coachella headliner performance this year. Chang's designs draw inspiration from traditional Korean objects such as roof tiles or flowers. All her designs, whether that be hanbok or accessories like hats, bags, and even scrunchies, feature her unique patterns and are infused with a creative touch.
People tend to save wearing hanbok for special occasions, which is a bit of a shame. I thought we could set aside traditional hanboks for those moments and introduce modified, newly designed hanboks for everyday wear. This could help hanbok become more beloved for longer.
Hanbok designer Kim Ji-won has been in the industry for nearly 3 decades. Kim, who studied Korean traditional dance, created her first hanbok brand for dancers in 1994. In 2017, she launched her second brand, focusing on making more wearable and comfortable hanboks. She was in charge of the opening and closing ceremony costumes of the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics and Paralympics. She says she's witnessed a positive change in Korea's Hanbok culture.
In the past, hanboks were primarily concerned with adhering to traditional aesthetics like collar and sleeve shapes. Nowadays, brands are striving to infuse these garments with historical meaning and significance. This shift has led to a broader array of items with various designs within the hanbok world.
Outside of Korea are those dedicated to promoting hanbok globally. The Asian American Youth Council, for instance, successfully requested New Jersey to declare the first overseas Hanbok Day in 2021.
On this day, you get to see political figures donning with Korean hanbok within the fashion show, and thereby integrating traditional Korean attire into a display of cultural respect.
These are just some of the people who are stitching together tradition and innovation to make sure that hanbok is a lasting legacy. 송유진, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Si-young Kim, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Argentina, where vote counting has begun in the country's presidential election, with the three main libertarian economists, Javier Milei, centrist Peronist economy minister Sergio Massa, and conservative Patricia Bullrich all vying to become leader. Given Argentina's current economic condition, where inflation is running at a three-decade high annual rate of 138%, Argentinians are seeking a candidate who can revive their economy. Some partial results show the government candidate, Sergio Massa, doing better than expected despite Milei's unexpected victory in the August primaries. The turnout has reached 74%, a figure far higher than for the August primaries. Moving over to Asia, ships from China and the Philippines collided on Sunday in the disputed South China Sea. In two separate incidents, Chinese Coast Guard ships collided with a Philippine military supply boat and a Philippine Coast Guard escort boat. Philippine authorities stated that both of the incidents took place near 2nd Thomas Shoal, where a Philippine marine outpost is located. This is an area of South China Sea that China is trying to claim. The 2016 arbitration ruling under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea deemed China's claims illegitimate. Near collisions have been commonplace in the region. However, this was the first time Philippine officials have publicly reported their ships being hit by China's ships. In the U.S. city of Detroit, the head of Synagogue has been found dead in the local park. President of the board at the Isaac-agreed downtown synagogue, Samantha Wall, is suspected to have been fatally stabbed at her home. Detroit police stated that there is so far no evidence suggesting anti-Semitic motives and that many of its resources have been mobilized for further investigation. Ministers describe Samantha Wall as a much-loved figure in the local community. Again, over in the U.S., pop star Taylor Swift's Eras tour concert film continues to beat domestic box office records, adding another $31 million in ticket sales in its second weekend in theaters. In total, the concert film is estimated to have secured almost $130 million in the 10 days since its release in more than 3,850 theaters across the country. And while the film's distributor is set to release the international figures on Monday, according to reports, if the streak continues, it may top Michael Jackson's This Is It concert film as the highest-grossing global concert movie of all time.
Good morning. After experiencing an unseasonably chill in the air over the weekend, temperatures will return to normal across Korea. It's a much warmer start to the day than Sunday, and highs will finally reach the 20s by the afternoon. Southern provinces will remain mostly sunny all day, while there is a slim chance that the west of central regions will see spotty passing rain. Meanwhile, part of Gangwon province is under a dry weather advisory today. Afternoon highs in most areas will be similar to or slightly higher than the season norms. Seoul and Gwangju will be topping out at 21 degrees Celsius. Daegu and Busan, Jeju will see highs at 22 degrees. I'll say it's nearly perfect weather to explore the enchanting autumn colors today. There will be more on and off rain in the west of central regions through Wednesday at dawn. While a major cold snap may not be in the cards this week, but prepare for a roller coaster ride of temperatures and take good care of yourself. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Tuesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
I'm live! 저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 이거 먹지 펜션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고.
좋아요.
It's a puppy kindergarten, and I'm here to sit in on a class.
I don't care.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation. Making news just for you. It's October 23rd here in Seoul. I'm Yoon, and you're watching News Generation, where we discuss the latest issues concerning our generation. Joining me in the studio is Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
And Al Song. Good morning. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s and share their own insights. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. It's no doubt that Korean food has blown up so much around the world. Last year, the Korean Food Promotion Institute surveyed foreigners and found out that Korean-style chicken, specifically, was the most popular dish in Korea. That's why we've seen K-chicken franchises like BBQ launch around 700 stores in 57 different countries. And by the year 2030, they plan to expand this number to 50,000. Korean-style bakery goods and burgers are also getting much popularity, as we're seeing hundreds of franchise stores launched around the world. And moving on, over in the Israel-Hamas war, a second convoy of aid trucks entered the Rafah crossing from the Egyptian side into the Gaza Strip on Sunday night. The first batch of much-needed supplies aboard 20 trucks entered the Gaza Strip on Saturday. Distribution did start on Sunday, but aid officials warned of a major humanitarian disaster as food, water, and fuel runs low. UN officials say at least 100 trucks would be needed today to cover urgent needs in Gaza. And lastly, some news related to Korea. Seoul City's education office has found that the number of students in the capital receiving counseling for dyslexia has jumped sevenfold in the last 3 years. The exact figure in August was 824. Most were elementary school students, and experts believe this is mainly because the pandemic has stripped students of the opportunity to go to the classroom and meet their friends. Now, dyslexia is a learning disability in reading, and though people do not outgrow it, there are many teaching approaches and strategies that experts suggest can be adopted from a young age to help people improve their reading skills. So here in the studio, what did you guys think about this news story?
I mean, it's just, it's sad that so many kids had to go through this because of the pandemic, and it's definitely something caused by us adults, but in the end the children are suffering for it. And I heard that if you're covering your mouth and your kind of lower half of the face, it actually stunts and it doesn't help with the reading, learning how to read. And on the other hand, I am glad that they're getting the help that they need, and dyslexia, like we mentioned, is something that you need to get it diagnosed early on to help with your schoolwork. So I hope that even in the future, if there are kids, not just from the pandemic, who do get diagnosed with dyslexia, they would be able to get the help they need.
Right, and Seoul Metropolitan Office is actually trying its best to not only counsel these students, but also find them at a very young age, because as we mentioned before, it's really important that they take premature measures. What are your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, like Niall said, there seems to be a lot of long-term effects from COVID-19, especially for the younger generation and that, I guess, development period where they're learning a lot. It's not just reading, though. I also heard that it's got to do with communication in general, because they aren't able to see the person's face or lip movement or expressions. Having a daughter, it does worry me, of course, but I was quite lucky that she was born just after the restrictions were eased off. However, saying that though, I do have a lot of friends who had COVID babies, so to speak, and they're afraid of what it's going to do for them long term in schools, which are already very competitive.
Right, and that was our news feed for this Monday. Let's now switch gears to our main discussion topic of the day. So today we're going to be talking about how Chinese state media reported back in September that North Korea is seemingly open to the idea of allowing the entry of foreigners. Now, this is the first time the reclusive regime has decided to do that since the COVID-19 pandemic. And to find out more and whether you can also go, take a look at the screen. But from today, I'm going to be using my AI voice secretary to introduce our main topic of the day through a video.
After years of closing itself off to the world, North Korea has reportedly approved the reopening of its borders. That's according to China's state broadcaster CCTV, which said in September that Pyongyang authorities are now allowing foreigners to enter North Korea after a 2-day quarantine period upon arrival. Details as to whether this includes foreigners who will want to visit for tourism purposes haven't been revealed. As of now, it seems to be open mostly for diplomatic delegations. The North has closed off its borders for 3 years and 8 months as part of a national emergency disease control system. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, the regime had suspended all international air, train, and ocean travel in and out of North Korea.
So from today on News Generation, every single time we introduce a main news topic, that will be my AI voice secretary doing all the talking. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I didn't think that it sounded very different from the regular one. So I guess you've been doing a really good job at being almost mechanically professional, and it sounds great.
All right, what about you, Walter?
Well, I think it was flawless as a person who follows AI as well. I guess you're gonna not have a job in a few years.
I hope not. I hope not. Only my AI voice secretary would be doing the main discussion introductory video, but the rest I will be doing that. Now, for the first time in more than 3 years, North Korea is seemingly opening up its borders for foreigners to visit. And one of our producers on NewsGen actually had the opportunity to visit the border between China and North Korea. And let's take a look at the footage he filmed. If you take a look at the screen, you can find out what North Korea looks like these days. And while we look at the footage, we're going to be reading into the latest measure of how they opened up their borders. So take a look at the screen to find out what North Korea looks like these days. So if we have the video ready in hand, you can see in a few seconds, that's what North Korea looks like. But Walter,
yes,
what can we read into the fact that North Korea reopened its borders for foreigners?
Okay, yeah, well, obviously another pandemic issue was made, which is, the borders were closed in North Korea, which left a lot of North Korean citizens, students, athletes, and diplomats stuck in either surrounding China or Russia or even other areas of the world. I mean, now they are able to return, but many are actually very worried about what could happen to them on their return. And I know Naya will bring something up in a second. However, I guess with these borders opening up, the only positive sound that I can see is the return of foreign delegations and their embassies, which they had to close during COVID because they weren't able to rotate staff. People couldn't go in and out. And so hopefully with these embassies up and running again, there can be, maybe a bit of a more clear connection between North Korea and other countries around the world.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, like Walter was mentioning earlier, concerns for additional violation of human rights as North Korea, starting around 2020, has placed many policies for, information and ideology censorship. And so when these North Korean defectors or people go back into the country, it may lead straight to their punishment, unfortunately. And the law right now prohibits conversing or exchanges of any kind between North Korean nationals and outsiders. They're very secluded. So it's kind of considered a threat when these people who left the country, who's interacted with other people, come back. And I think this adds to the concern, but as we were looking at in the video, it's just a little bit of water and you can cross into North Korea. It's so close. So a lot of people, there's a lot of North Korean defectors that cross into China. but China has recently allowed for legal usage of weapons against North Korean defectors, and I think that's kind of concerning.
That's definitely an issue we'll be looking at. And if you keep looking at the screen, these are the borders like from China and North Korea, right? And as of now, North Korean officials didn't reiterate the fact that they would open up its borders, like to who specifically, and whether this is also open for tourism. We'll have to see what happens. But because they don't have a separate like Ministry of Tourism, or they're not that open with their information, it was quite nice to see what our producer filmed, because we could get a glimpse of it. Because
I love that.
Yeah, South Korean or U.S. passport holders can't go in there. So I think a lot of our viewers had a chance to look at what it would look like now. Now let's move on to our second part of the discussion. Following this announcement of the North reopening its borders, I hear that some defectors, whether they were in China, were actually sent back to the North. Is that true though?
Yeah, after the Asian Games, North Korea human rights activist group claimed that around 600 North Korean defectors who were detained in China were sent back to North Korea. And the Korean Ministry of Unification confirmed that the number and the identities of these people are unknown, but the repatriation is indeed true.
Oh, I see. And Walter, would you like to add on?
Yeah, so the Korean government is keeping obviously a constant interest in the issue of the North Korean defectors. The South Korean government says that North Korean defectors staying abroad should not be forcibly repatriated against their free will. And the UN Refugee Convention has a principle of prohibiting forced repatriation. So they're really looking out for these North Korean defectors.
Right, the reopening of borders is shedding light to a pressing issue, which is humanitarian issues. And it's been a while since we actually talked about North Korea-related issues here on News Generation. Where are we in terms of dealing with the North? What do our North Korean-related policies look like at the moment?
So with the change of the administration, there is a change, obviously, in the North Korean policies. I believe for the previous administration was trying to, be a bit more friendly with them. This one seems to be a bit different. For the current government, they are focused on the Korea-US alliance more so. And the South Korean government are very clear on their intentions with Korea, Japan, and the US. They have reduced support towards North Korea, as far as I know, in regards to, let's say, donations. So at the moment, we're in a quite an awkward stalemate.
I see. Al?
Yeah, and obviously there's two sides to everything, and like we were mentioning, the previous government and the current one, but both the ruling and the opposition party are split on the North Korean policies at the moment. The opposing party criticizes the lack of communication in the current administration, but the ruling party's views are that the communication and the efforts for peace with North Korea is actually a threat to national security.
Right, and that's definitely an issue that we need to be talking about more. Now, I would like to find out whether the North opening up its borders could actually boost inter-Korean relations, and let's do that by including an expert in our talks. We're now going to include a North Korea affairs expert. He's currently hosting a podcast on NK News. It's Jocko Zwetslut. Welcome, Jocko.
Good morning, and thanks for having me on the show.
Hello.
All right, so we're going to go around and ask you a question each. My first question is, how has the North closing itself off to the world affected the livelihoods of its own residents, and how are North Koreans living at the moment?
Economically speaking, North Korea is actually more polarized than South Korea in some ways. Those who are rich in North Korea, we're talking about the so-called donju, or money masters, they're less rich than their counterparts in South Korea. But those who are poor and are struggling to put food on the table are generally much worse off than the bottom rung in South Korean society. Markets are tolerated in North Korea by the government, but only to a certain extent. And most means of production, we're talking about resources like land, labor, machinery, still belong to the state and are allocated by the state, meaning that it's difficult to engage in large-scale private enterprise. Small-scale businesses were possible to a certain extent before the COVID pandemic because of a lot of informal, irregular trade cross-border with China. But that border shut, as we know, in January 2020, and has only just been opened since this summer. So those who relied on direct or indirect trade in imported goods really suffered for the last 3.5 years. Now, China gives enough resources to the North Korean state to keep the lights on, but not enough for the economy to thrive and grow. In fact, there was some reporting earlier this year that there's a food crisis in some parts of North Korea, with people undernourished, some wasting, stunting, and even, if you believe the most extreme reports that are hard to verify, starvation in rural areas. So we won't know the full extent of this until international NGOs, aid agencies, and embassies start going back into North Korea. As you said, the border with China is open again, and in fact, NK News reported that North Korea's trade across the border with China grew for 4 straight months up to September, and the September figure was at a nearly 4-year high. But it's probably those state-owned enterprises and military-related companies that will see the profits of that trade first. The small traders and the market stallholders will be some way down that chain of distribution, and with North Korea and China's increased border security on both sides, I think it'll be hard for some of them to build up their informal trade networks and supply chains again. The Republic of Korea, the Bank of Korea here in South Korea, believes that North Korea's GDP fell by 0.2% in real terms, but the International Credit Rating Agency, Fitch, actually sees it growing this year up to 1%. So it's a little bit unclear. We're waiting for more information.
Thank you for that really detailed answer. Like, I hear before borders were closed off, many North Korean residents had access to South Korean cultural products. We're talking K-pop songs and drama series recorded on a disc. Is this true? And tell us a little bit more about how North Korean residents could get a hold of South Korean cultural content.
Yes, it is true that some North Koreans have access, or who have had access to South Korean cultural products. We're talking about K-pop music, dramas, and movies. We don't have a very good picture of what percentage of North Korean people living in which areas have come into contact, but generally it's the ones living in border areas and also in the capital of Pyongyang. Actually, in February this year, a North Korean refugee wrote a fascinating Ask a North Korean column on the NK News website called What Was It Like to Listen to K-pop for the First Time? So I encourage you to go and check that out. What we know for sure is that consuming culture from South Korea has to be done in secret, because spreading South Korean pop culture is forbidden by North Korean law with some very strong punishments. Before the pandemic, that content went in by 2 major ways. Firstly, traders would bring in USB drives or SD or micro SD cards from China. And they used to bring in CD-ROMs, but these were bigger and easier to find by the North Korean security agencies. So they've been replaced by these smaller media, like the micro SD cards. And they're often sold in the informal local marketplaces or Jangmadang. Once the border with China was closed during the pandemic, it was almost impossible to get this kind of information across from China, because there's no internet. So another way that it gets in is South Korean activists who send USBs over the demilitarized zone with balloons against the wishes of the South Korean government. Some of these USBs end up in the hands of the North Korean people and can then be copied and spread. And so this continued to a certain limited extent during the pandemic. But the thing about spreading such materials is, as I said, it's dangerous, it is forbidden. Some people can even be punished with execution for spreading what is seen as imperialist and anti-state material. But it does happen in these Jangmadang marketplaces through networks of people who trust each other, like family members and very close friends. And now that the border with China is open again, we may see that trade increase once more.
Wow. Wow, so speaking of Jangmadang, there's many experts who refer to North Korea's younger generation as the Jangmadang generation, kind of like how in Korea we say MZers, combining millennials and Gen Z for the 20s and 30s. What exactly are some distinctive traits, because I'm sure they have them, behind North Koreans' Jangmadang generation?
Yes, the Jangmadang generation, meaning literally the marketplace generation, has been around for quite a while now in North Korea. The first cohort of this group went through their childhood in the arduous march. That's the North Korean name for the big famine that took place in the mid-1990s. So we're talking about a cohort that reached adulthood in the mid-2000s or the mid-noughties. And they're a generation who did not know the public distribution system of rations received from the state. Instead, they grew up knowing that if you want something, you have to buy it with money, preferably foreign currency, at a marketplace, this Jangmadang, or at a shop. So that's the first characteristic of the Jangmadang generation. And they've been around now for over 15 years, and each year their number keeps growing because more children come of age and join their ranks who only know that to buy things you've got to have money and you've got to do it in a marketplace. Right. So as well as their understanding of basic market principles of supply and demand and the value of money, the Jangmadang generation has also been exposed, as I said in the earlier part, to South Korean and other world cultures through the USB discs.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but due to time, I would like to briefly ask you then. It feels like there's a lot of commonalities between South Korean millennials and Gen Z with North Korea's Jangmadang generation. In a sentence or two, could you tell us how you would forecast for our generations to combine together and better facilitate inter-Korean relations then?
Oh, well, comparing South Korean Generation MZ to the North Korean Jangmadang kids is really difficult because their life experiences are so different. The average North Korean person is struggling to make ends meet, while the average young person in South Korea is trying to get into a good university and then travel overseas before getting a good job. So the needs are very different. But of course, young people, they have hopes and dreams and hopefully haven't become disillusioned yet. So they're engaged on both sides of the DMZ in a very competitive struggle in their respective societies. So they've got competition in common, but in terms of better North-South inter-Korean relations, I really think that the former President Moon gave it his best shot, and North Korea's leadership still decided to cut off communication. So it's hard to see better inter-Korean relations until North Korea has better relations with the whole world, including the United Nations and all of its near and far neighbors.
Right, and hopefully the reopening of its borders could maybe pave a pathway for North Korea to actually step up to the international arena, but we'll have to see, I guess.
Indeed. We better not count our chickens before they hatch.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Jocko. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and to further expand on our conversation with Jocko, we asked our viewers to share their thoughts and hopes for what our generation can do to foster better inter-Korean relations. Take a look at the screen to find out what 3 of them had to say. Tasmia said, I want the people of North Korea to live a stable lifestyle. They're humans too, just like us. Angel said, get rid of the antiquated imperialistic mindset and put their people first. They need foreign trade routes for prosperity instead of a poor, isolated country. Terrace Bell said, I would like to see their mindset be more open to the idea of peaceful reunification, but in a short term, maybe a formal end to the war. And I think the last question I would like to ask you guys now is how can we foster a better relationship between the North and the South here in the peninsula, starting with you now?
It's such a tricky matter, and I don't think, it's not easy, but I believe that as we were talking about the younger generation, despite being different, Jangmadang and MZers, but I do feel like as we're taking the stage, there needs to be more of a heart-to-heart and a good communication, but of course, everything I just said is a very idealistic answer.
Ideal, yeah.
So to simplify, I'll just say better communication for the future.
What about you, Walter?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Niall. I mean, the whole situation, the hostility between the two countries at the moment doesn't feel good, and given what's happening around the world, it's quite scary to be living here right now anyway.
And I think the conclusion we have every single time we talk about North Korea here on NewsGen is we need to make sure there's a division between politics and humanitarian issues. Because at the end of the day, as also Jocko mentioned, it's the human beings living in there and their livelihoods are affected. So hopefully we could foster better discussion so that their livelihoods are protected. In the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
And now Song.
No problem.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
하나, 둘, 셋.